And I have a very distinct memory as we were approaching Haneda Airport. I was on the window seat and just, from Johannesburg, which I thought was a massive city, and trust
Yeah.
me, it wasn't,
Yeah.
to landing in Tokyo. And even in 1978, Tokyo was a city of 12 million people.
Wow.
12 million people. That was way more than the population of South Africa then. And just, I was blown away.
So, second interview for 2023. Thank you for liking and subscribing the channel. So great to be able to share the experiences that I have in my life, but also to talk to people who are inspirational to me, people who have done some incredible things with their lives and continue to do so. And I've been waiting. I've kind of been holding off on doing this one for a while, because this is a big one for me, because the gentleman I'm going to introduce you to is largely responsible for my Ironman journey, when I tried racing them, but also part of what I do for a living now, which is travel around and go to the most amazing places and meet inspirational athletes. So it's a big one for me, and he's kind of a mentor as well, which is a lot of pressure on him. I'm not sure he wants that title. Paul Kaye, great to have you on the show. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you, Gordon Graham. Yeah. Thanks for having me on your show. Your second interview for 2023. My first for 2023. You catch me on the wooden deck of where I live out in the middle of nowhere, out in the countryside. You're going to hear weed eaters in the background, chainsaws, lawnmowers, Kona, our dog, you'll hear her barking, and you might hear the occasional, maybe even see the occasional boat go past in the background there, because I'm very blessed to live on one of South Africa's biggest dams in the top 10. And I live here because it used to be just a little cabin that I would go away on weekends and holidays to decompress after a big season. But thanks to COVID and lack of work for almost 2 years, made some big decisions to simplify our lives and also to get off the grid, and ended up making our cottage, our holiday home, our full-time home. And talking about off the grid, we are off the grid. We use dam water, which is for irrigation. We have special processing tanks for our sewage that converts it from black water into irrigation quality grey water. And by the end of this month, there will be panels on the roof, so won't be using any coal or nuclear or diesel powered electricity, which was one of the big motivators behind living here as well. So yeah, welcome to my home.
Well, listen, I've been there on various occasions, and it is an absolutely stunning place to call home. And it's a bit of a contrast to your normal hustle and bustle that you get up to. Normally, you are flying around the world. You're moving from city to city, driving through countries. So it's kind of like a hideaway, like a nice little place to come back to and switch off for a bit. Yeah,
you could say that, but as human beings, so long as we grow every day, so long as we get to know ourselves better and be more comfortable in our skin and more comfortable around in our environment, both local and then, the bigger environment that is the world that we live in, that is a good thing. And I think I've kind of recently learned that I am an introvert. And a lot of people don't believe that. I've always said that I'm shy, and I actually am inherently shy. So, for example, I don't make phone calls, and I generally don't answer phone calls unless they're emergencies. I have an issue with that. You would have noticed, I mean, you and I are moving around event site. I kind of get a bit frustrated when you stop and talk to everybody, you, Gordon Graham. It takes very long to move around any event site with you. And you engage and you make small talk and you make everybody feel like a hero. And I typically struggle to make small talk. When I'm in an environment that features a lot of people, I need to be busy. I need to have a purpose. That's the only way I can be in that environment. So when it's at home, I'm braaiing or I'm driving the boat. When I'm at other people, I offer to be the barman or do their braaiing. At school, I always offer to be the photographer, or I was part of the first aid, or I helped at the tuck shop. And by being busy and by having a purpose, that's how I cope in environments of lots of people. And perhaps that is why being an announcer is perfect for me when environments of a lot of people. But people see me being an announcer and see me being in the spotlight, as they like to think, and they cannot believe that I'm an introvert. They cannot believe that I'm shy. But my introvertness is why I really enjoy this environment, because it allows me to decompress after what is usually, a huge season of being around thousands upon thousands of people and everybody wanting a piece of you, which is a blessing and a privilege, and I'm honored by it. But this is the other side of that continuum, and in a way, and excuse me swatting the flies, but they're insane at the moment. But in a way, that's how I have the energy to do what I do for a living, because I get to do this when I'm not working. And look at me, I'm in full holiday send mode.
Love it.
Shave my head, got a bit of a beard, just
nothing wrong with that.
Holiday mode.
We spoke to Mark Morell last year, who said you can't give out what you don't have inside you. So I think it's a refuel. When you go home, you get a bit of time to just refuel, and then you've got to stock that up and then give out 6 months worth of energy to athletes around the world. Paul, you have an amazing story, not just from the announcing side. Most people would know you now from the announcing side of things, but let's just rewind. Where were you born? I believe you're a KZN boy, even though you are synonymous with the Western Cape. So born in KZN and schooled where?
So born in Natal. Apparently, I was conceived on a ship between Cape Town and Durban, but that's a story for another day. But hence maybe why I'm a bit of a water baby. Yeah, born in Natal, lived in Hillcrest, which in those days was an hour's drive from the city of Durban. So that's pretty much on the Comrades route, if you know anything about ultra running, between Durban and Pietermaritzburg. Lived there for the first 6 years of my life. Thereafter, started school in KZN. KwaZulu-Natal, for those who are not South African. From there, my dad's job took us to Johannesburg, and like Johannesburg was like, wow. I mean, when I grew up in Hillcrest, it was such a tiny, tiny place. Often when you went to the general dealer, the general store to do your shopping, some people arrived on horseback, you know what I mean?
Wow.
And then to go to Johannesburg, which was just this bustling metropolis. And that was 1976. Yes, I am that old. Before my wife was even born, my goodness. Joburg was like, wow, this huge, kind of scary place.
Metro.
But my parents didn't enjoy Joburg. My dad didn't like Johannesburg. He didn't really enjoy his job there. We were only there for 2 years. And whilst we were there, and my mother is half Italian, half British, via Zimbabwe, Rhodesia in those days. My dad, full on German. He moved here when he was 19 years old. So yeah, I'm half German, quarter Italian, I think a quarter Zimbabwean, British, 100% South African.
Yeah. And conceived in international waters.
And if when we get onto the whole announcing thing, I think sort of my background and growing up in South Africa, which is so multicultural, all contributed massively towards being an international, an announcer on the international stage. Likewise for you, likewise for Dane as DJ, and Max Kluwer, etc. Because we are born in diversity and we're used to diversity. Therefore, we adapt really well, every week, every month into a different city, different culture, different languages. Anyway, rewind back to Johannesburg. One of my dad's best friends who got him into South Africa called him up and said, hey, I'm working in Japan at the moment. We're looking for fully bilingual spoken and written English and German to come and work in Japan. Would you be interested? My dad had just turned 40, so maybe he was going through a midlife crisis as well. My mum knew he was not happy in Johannesburg, and my mum was a very adventurous person. My dad was a lot more conservative. And she said, hey, what have we got to lose? And you can imagine, as South Africans, you could not get more foreign than
Yeah.
Japan.
Yeah.
You know, and Japan then was probably even more foreign than China is now. So she said, let's go. So my dad accepted the job. My dad had been in the photographic industry. This was now in the optics game, working with Zeiss. So he needed to train up for the new job. So we went back to his home city in Germany, Frankfurt. We were living at his parents'. I was 8 years old. Yeah, 8 years old. It was winter. I saw snow for the first time in my life. I went to his old school in Frankfurt and started to learn German.
Wow.
My mum stayed in South Africa with my sister and wrapped up the house and packed everything up, and eventually joined us after about 3-4 months. And 6 months after my dad's training, it was about May, June 1978. I'm 8 years old, about to turn 9. We flew Frankfurt to the old, I think it is Haneda Airport in Tokyo. It's now Narita that they use, Narita. And I pretty much remember feeling like, was it Bill Murray in Lost in Translation, where he lands in Tokyo and you see him sitting in the cab, in the taxi, absolutely destroyed from the long trip and probably jet lag, with his head against the window of the taxi and the reflection of the neon lights as he drives through Tokyo. And I have a very distinct memory as we were approaching Haneda Airport. I was on the window seat, and just, you know, from Johannesburg, which I thought was a massive city, and trust me, it wasn't, to landing in Tokyo. And even in 1978, Tokyo was a city of 12 million people.
Wow.
12 million people. That was way more than the population of South Africa then. And just, I was blown away, flabbergasted by the scale of things, the lights. You know, when we left South Africa, then you'll remember we had 2 hours of TV a day in black and white, and landing in Tokyo with 7 channels, color, stereo, 24 hours a day, even with English dubbing that we could listen to via our radio. There was a radio channel you could switch on to so that you could watch the English TV programs in English on your radio. This is 1978.
Wow.
So yeah, we moved to Tokyo, lived there for 5 years. Mind-blowing time of my life, if you can imagine, from approximately the age of 9 till 13, how impressionable. Learned Japanese quite quickly because we were the very few gaijin foreigners that were there. Another wonderful little skill set in the back of my mind that has contributed towards being an announcer. Had the time of my life. Then my dad's contract came to an end. We were moved back to Germany. Even though my dad was German, he decided, don't like Germany, don't like the weather, don't like the miserable people. Entschuldigung an alle Deutsche. He'd got so used to the South African lifestyle. Even my mother said, no, we're going to move back to South Africa, but on one condition: we go to Cape Town, where she was born. So in 1982, my mother, my sister, myself, we moved back to South Africa. My dad moved back to Japan to finish his contract. And funny enough, we were in Stuttgart. And Stuttgart, as you might know, is the home of Mercedes-Benz, but also home of Porsche. And you know, one of my passions is cars.
That's where it came from.
That's where that was created.
That's where it came from.
Yeah, we moved back to South Africa. We moved to Cape Town, just my mum and my sister and I. And we moved to Sea Point along the Atlantic seaboard. And ever since then, I very much consider myself a Cape Townian.
Yeah.
Went to Sea Point Boys High School, which weirdly enough, I always tell people, and you know how my career as an adult, my working life started. I always tell people I didn't get very, very far in life, because if you know Sea Point Beach Road reasonably well, and if you know Rocklands Beach, you'll know that's where the SABC is. And what it was called back then, Sea Point Boys High School, was across the road from the SABC. And my working life started as a radio DJ at what was then called Radio Good Hope Stereo, now called Good Hope FM, which was across the road
from where you went to school.
So I always said, I didn't get very far. I got
Wow.
across the road.
Across the road. Well, since then you have gotten quite far. We'll talk about your travel stats in a bit. I was doing mine the other day and then I compared mine to yours. And I was just like, okay, never mind. But that's okay. That's a great segue there. And I can tell you worked in radio because you set that up beautifully. Let's talk about going across the road and starting working life in the radio industry. We spoke to Jeff Aliff last week and he mentioned that his first radio gig was working alongside you. So let's talk about that then. How did that happen?
Very, very weird. I haven't got a clue how it happened. I mean, you must remember, we started off by me saying that I'm shy and an introvert. And at school, I hated doing orals. I hated having to stand up and speak in front of the class or read an essay. I ended up being vice head boy at school. Um, and I kind of, it kind of ruined my matric year because I couldn't stand the pressure. I was always told I was a natural leader, but I didn't like the pressure of being the leader. Um, I didn't enjoy having to get on stage at assembly and read stuff and make announcements. And at school, because I was reasonably cheeky, I've always had an opinion and a reasonably big mouth, but don't assume or make the mistake of assuming that a big mouth and having an opinion means you're not introvert and shy. But I was always told, oh, you'd make a great lawyer. And I started believing that, oh, I'd make a great lawyer. And back in those days, it was huge on TV, LA Law, if you remember.
Ah, yes,
it used to be one of my favorite TV programs. I thought, wow, that looks cool. I want to stand there and argue with people and win. But that's not what law is. Only maybe if you're a litigator. And actually, in my matric year, I spent 3 weeks at a big law firm in Cape Town. And I shadowed a financial lawyer who was super successful man, drove one of those famous cars from that city in Germany that I mentioned.
This isn't radio. We can say Mercedes-Benz. We can drop as many brands as you like. Oh, Porsche.
Porsche. Okay, yeah. So all I saw these lawyers do was homework and more homework and study and read volumes of manuals and books to understand the case law, to fight something or defend something or put something forward. And I'm like, nah, there's nothing that I hated more at school than homework. I was a good listener. I got through school by listening in class, but I hated homework. Anyway, I was told, you're going to be a lawyer. And in those years in South Africa, you still had conscription. And I was supposed to go to the army, even though I wanted to go to the Navy because I was at Sea Rescue at NSRI or Air Force because I loved aviation. But no, because I was super fit, I played water polo at school, I played hockey, I was in swimming, I did life saving. No, G1, K1, you got an infantry, my friend. You are cannon fodder. They wanted to send me to places like Grahamstown and Palabo and places I didn't want to go to. On top of that, my father grew up in Frankfurt during the Second World War and had the living daylights bombed out of them. Eat the potato skins during the week, eat the potato on the weekend kind of stuff. And he was a complete pacifist. And one of the reasons he left Germany was, anti-war. And he's like, there's no ways, my son, you are going to the army. Wow. Number one. Number two, the army at the time, you were fighting your fellow citizens. You were enforcing apartheid. And that didn't sit very well with me. So the best way to get out of going to the army was go to university. So my dad said, you're going to Stellenbosch University. So I went to Stellenbosch University, I enrolled in BCom law. But remember, I hated homework. I wasn't really good at studying. And to anybody who is still young and at school and wants to go to university, here's some advice for you. You need to study at university. Just listening well in class is going to get you 30% of the way. The rest is up to you and the bookwork you do.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I had a very good friend who was on campus radio, Radio Marti. And I didn't mention before, but my dad was a semi-professional jazz musician. So I grew up loving music. I knew nothing about pop music, but I loved jazz. I grew up listening to Chick Corea, Pat Metheny, Keith Jarrett, people like that, John McLaughlin, Aldi Meola. So very much with the jazz background. The first LP I ever bought was Maynard Ferguson, who was a Canadian jazz trumpeter. But I loved music. And I would hang out in the studio with my good friend who was a DJ on Radio Marty. And as he played a song, I'd go through the record and say, "Oh, I think this song would sound really good with what you're playing right now." And he got so hurtful of me telling him what to play. He said, "Dude, you need your own radio show." He enrolled me into an audition. Remember, I'm introvert and shy. I said, "No flipping ways." He took me to the Akka, got me a little bit tipsy on a few beers. I finally had some Dutch courage. I did the audition. I got a show on the radio station, and there were two Pauls, and I'm not going to give away too many secrets, but one was Paul, and his surname started with the letter M. My surname started with the letter K. That's how I became Paul K. On our schedules on the roster, Paul M, Paul K. And I fell in love with being a DJ. And I quickly realized that no matter how bad the day I was having, whether I'd broken up with a girlfriend, whether I was sick, whether I'd failed a subject, when the red light went on, I felt good.
Yeah.
And I could do this. And I started doing more and more shows. I became the head of broadcasting. Whilst at Radio Marty, the management at Radio Good Hope came and did a talk, heard some of us on air, and offered me an audition at Radio Good Hope. I did the audition, I passed it, and I was invited to come do radio training. So throughout my second year at varsity, I was always training at Radio Good Hope. Then at the end of my second year, I got one of those letters from the university saying, "Terribly sorry, but your marks are not good enough.
Oh dear.
You do not have enough credits, and you are not welcome back for your third year." I'm like, sweet. I got offered a job at Radio Good Hope, and I said, sweet. And I joined Good Hope FM in April 1990. It was the 27th of April was the Friday. On the 28th of April was my first day on air. It was a Saturday. And I actually like those dates because those dates coincide exactly with 4 years later when we as South Africans stood in line to vote for democracy, vote for Nelson Mandela. So those dates are very significant for me. They mean a lot to me. So yeah, my first day on air, 28th of April, 1990. And that started a wonderful career in radio, which lasted as a DJ until 1998. And I quickly realized I was a good DJ, but not a great DJ. I had never finished my university, so I decided maybe I should go into management. And there was an opening in management. And I put my hand up, and weirdly, at the age of 27, I was offered the job as station manager of Good Hope FM.
Wow.
I was station manager there until December 2002. I briefly was a radio DJ at P4, which has become Heart FM in 2003, whilst I was working as a marketing manager of a global software firm. Loved what I learned, but didn't enjoy the subject matter.
Right.
I'm blessed. I've always done what I love for a living.
Yeah.
And it's easier to get out of bed when that's the case. Decided to go on my own for a while, did weird things like, can you imagine in 2003, using an ISDN line and a satellite phone, interviewing the skippers sailing from Cape Town to Rio.
Wow.
Editing that on my laptop back then. This is a 56K dial-up ISDN line.
Wow.
Editing that on my laptop, packaging it and sending it to the BBC and Voice of America every day.
Wow.
To go online, top and tailing it, typical, more Jeff Aliff style sports reporting and radio DJ style. Interesting experience it was. And then I ended up at Touchline Media as associate publisher of Runner's World and Bicycling magazines. And I was excited about that because I thought, let's become a media specialist. I had a lot of radio experience behind the mic and off the mic. Whilst I was at the SABC, I did a lot of TV work. I was an anchor for the morning TV show, Monday to Friday, in those days called AM Today.
Wow.
I did a lot of sports TV, junior top sport. So I had some TV experience, a lot of voice work, and I thought, but I know nothing about magazines. And then at Touchline as associate publisher and then ultimately publisher of Runners World and Bicycling, I got into a bit of triathlon publishing for Ironman South Africa. We did their magazine. Um, but then I realized the world is going digital. And then I was offered a job at a digital publishing concern, which didn't last very long for me because the sports involved was golf, didn't really tick my boxes. At the same time, I turned 40. I believe I might have been going through a small midlife crisis. I'd lost my parents. I'd been through a very unpleasant divorce. My children were taken away and moved overseas. So it was an unpleasant time of my life. And I wasn't enjoying filling in a leave form to see my children. So I thought, could I be the master of my own time and the master of my own destiny?
Wow.
Then I'd also met Kelly, my current wife. And, you know, that brings so much good energy when you have an incredible person in your life. Kind of fueled my confidence, which gave me the confidence to turn my hobby of announcing, which had started in 1990 already at rubber duck races, triathlon in 94, 95, turn my hobby, which was making me maybe in those days 20 to 30,000 Rand a year. You can't live on that, which is about those days 2,000 euros a year. Could I turn my hobby into a living? Could I pay the bond? Could I pay my debit orders? Could I feed my family? Could I pay my maintenance? Could I look after my sister? I have an intellectually challenged sister. And I thought, you know, at the age of 40, and you remember, I kind of helped you on your journey.
Oh, yes.
Very, very simple.
Oh, yes.
With my learnings. And I thought to myself, at the age of 40, I'd learned enough as an adult, and I could take those skills and invest those in a new direction in life. But I'm also young enough to have the energy to invest into a new direction in life. But I'm also young enough that if I fail, potentially I could go back into the job market.
Yeah.
So I took a chance. I reached out to the Cape Town Cycle Tour, to David Belair's, and I reached out to Ironman South Africa, Keith Bowler, and I said, this is the formula I think you should apply to sports presentation around your events.
Yeah.
And this is what I think it's worth. And I said to my then girlfriend, now wife, I said, if they accept my proposals, I'm resigning my job. And Dave, bless his soul, Keith, bless his soul, they said, we like it. It makes sense. They accepted my proposal, and that was enough money to cover my bond for 3 months. Not the food, not the debit orders,
just the bond, yeah.
So I said, I'm going to do it. It was December 2009. Boom. And that's how this career of being an announcer started. Now, that's a long soliloquy. I'm going to breathe. And you did say this is the conversation, but I'm doing all the talking.
Well, I must say, what a journey. And you've kind of covered everything that I wanted to talk about from, you know, pre-radio, radio, and then transitioning into Ironman and into announcing. And it's not just Ironman, there are others, but your main focus is with the EMEA group, Ironman group, and also in the States. Interesting that you got into it through taking a risk, taking a chance, and saying, okay, if they accept my proposal, I'll go for it. And then they did. Was there any doubts at any point that, you know, once you'd started, did you think, well, have I done the right thing? You know, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Or have you always just felt this is where you belong and let's push forward?
So just a little bit of advice. Often when you want to make a change in life, specifically career, you kind of wait for the perfect job to come your way, or you wait for the perfect moment. So you stay in your job, waiting for the perfect moment. The advice I gave you, and this is advice I give a lot of people, you got to get off the fence. Very, very seldom do you stay in this job that you're not happy with, dreaming of that new job, and it suddenly comes your way. Once you make that transition, once you move, now you realize you have no choice but to make this work. So yes, I had doubts, huge amount of doubts. I had a lot of anxiety, but those doubts and that anxiety, you channel it into pushing you to go and succeed and make it happen.
Yeah.
I did so many different things. I did playlists for hotels, for restaurants. I commentated walking races, running races, like 5K races, little weekend jobs, to marathons and ultra marathons, horse racing. I worked at the JMB Met, powerboat racing, yacht racing, as well as the cycling, road and mountain bike, as well as triathlon, which was sprint triathlon, Olympic distance. Keep in mind, back then, there was 170.3 in South Africa and one Ironman. From that, you cannot make a living.
Yeah.
So I did anything and everything. The other thing I did is I said to my clients, I said, look, I should be charging you this, but I'm going to invest in the process as much as you are. So I'm going to charge you this to start with. If after the event you are happy with my work, we're going to start negotiating from this original price.
Right.
And they all agreed to that. Once I got into a groove, once I did more and more events, once I showed that my methodology of sports presentation, which is make the athlete feel like a hero, make the sponsors really happy that they're part of the event, and make the spectators go, wow, this is awesome. Maybe I could do this. I call it the Holy Trilogy.
Yeah.
If you get that right, you're succeeding. So once I proved that concept to my clients, to the events I worked for, I could charge them more. And the more I charged them, the more I could justify charging the other events, who sometimes I might not have really wanted to work for, but I needed to pay the bills. And I could kind of fire myself by being too expensive. But then I also remember I went through a divorce and my children moved overseas, and I needed and wanted to be with my children more. I needed to see them more, but I couldn't afford it. So I thought to myself, how could I work more in Europe? And strangely enough, in 2010, I was offered to announce Ironman Austria. That was my first international Ironman that I announced. Whilst there, we discussed the possibility, and it wasn't owned by Ironman. So all the Ironman events in those days were owned by franchisees, if you can call it that, license holders. The guys who owned Ironman Austria were partners in Ironman South Africa. They also owned Ironman France. They had two races in Austria, 70.3 St. Pölten and Ironman Austria. So, and they had Ironman Nice. So we spoke about, well, they wanted to make their races feel international. And one of the ways of doing that was to bring a native tongue English speaker to their races. So they brought me to Ironman Austria in 2010. They liked it. They said, we'd like to have you at 70.3 St. Pölten, Ironman Nice, Ironman Austria. So in 2011, I was contracted to those races. Whilst at Ironman Austria, I was asked to come to Ironman UK that year, and I announced the first ever iconic Face the Dragon Ironman Wales and Tembe in 2011. So one international race in 2010, 5 in 2011. And at Ironman Wales in 2011, Helge Lawrence, because by then the franchisees had all sold to the company that had bought Ironman, because they wanted to own the races, to control the brand, to control the experience so that it's one decent level for all. They had now been made in charge of what was then Ironman Europe.
When we return with Paul, go get yourself a cup of coffee. When we return with Paul, we'll talk about that Ironman tour and how that's developed and then created opportunities for others. And we'll also talk about the family side of Paul Kaye and rumors that he might be a grandfather. That's coming up. Stay with us.